Hi everybody, and welcome to this tutorial where I want to talk to you about drawing eyes. Now, drawing eyes is not easy at all, and especially when you want to start to draw something and get a likeness or to catch that soul into your portrait drawing, then it is very, very important indeed to make a very thorough study of the eye itself. Now, eyes are peculiar things, and it is true that they are the soul of the person behind it. Now, when we look at the eyeball itself, it kind of looks like a ping pong ball. And up on that ping pong ball, of course, there is the iris. And inside the iris, there is the pupil, which is actually a hole that goes into the eye, and light is casted onto the lens and then turn around, so we can actually see what is going on outside. Now, this big ball, the eyeball, is set in a kind of a box, which is called the skull. So here you can see that ping pong ball, and what I did here is I printed out two eyes, and I tried to draw in the skull itself. Now, this is a great way to get the feel of that 3D and how the eye is built up. So here you can see that ping pong ball inside that skull itself, and then there is flesh over the bones of the skull, and of course flesh that is going over those eyeballs. Here you see the upper eyelid and the lower eyelid, and then you will start recognizing differences. For instance, in this model on the top left, the upper eyelid is very good to see. Then here we see the bone structure with the flesh over that. You have a well-formed upper eyelid, and here you see the lower eyelid, and there's even light casted here on that top eyelid and also here on the lower eyelid. Now, for the model here on the left bottom, you can see that the upper eyelid is hardly to be seen. There is a lot of shadow going on here, and here you can see the shadow casted by the eyelid in the iris, and she has a somewhat more thicker lower eyelid. So you can already see some differences between the eyes. Now, of course, the eyes can also go from left to right. And what you see here is that when you have that big ball, that ping pong ball, then here you can see the iris, and the pupil, of course, where the light hits inside. But also you can see that the corona that lies over the iris and what protects it from dust and sand and those kind of things is a bit, on top of that eyeball. Now that is what makes that nice shiny dots on the iris itself. And the light spots can differ, and that depends on where the light is coming from, of course, and you can see it here. It differs from here. So you have to pay attention to how the light hits that corona. Now, what is also very, very important, that is that you recognize how the flesh is behaving. Now, here you can see that there is that depth of the skull bone here. You can see that here. Now here is the circle for the eyeball itself. Here, of course, you can see the iris, and then this upper eyelid has some kind of thickness. So this actually is how thick that eyelid is, and then that goes inside here, popping around here. So this is the flesh that is over the bone of the skull and over the ball of the eye itself. Now this is rounded too, so you have to draw it rounded. Also, for the lower eyelid, there is a kind of thickness. So this is the thickness of the lower eyelid. What is also very important is that if you have that big ball here, then here is that area for the tear, that reservoir for the teardrops. So that's just outside that ball here, while the corner of this here of the eye itself is on the corner here of that same ball. Now, having said this all, I hope you get that 3D feel a little bit more. So let's start drawing and see what this knowledge brings us. So that was a lot of information. Let's start drawing. And for this drawing I'm using the gray toned paper, and this one is by Arteza. And furthermore I'm using a pencil eraser, a black charcoal, any charcoal will do, and a white charcoal, which is the same actually as a white pastel pencil. And this is my pre-study, and I will take this reference photo and I will place this on my Patreon page, of course. And what you need to get in mind is a horizontal and a vertical line, then that circle of the eyeball itself, and then you will know exactly where to place your pupil. So I'm going to ruin my pre-study. It's no problem. You just have to make as many eyes as possible. I'm doing that too. I'm drawing as many eyes as I can, also in different angles. But for starters, just start with that eye that is really frontal. That's the easiest way to start. So what I do is I draw in my horizontal line, my vertical line, and the circle of the eyeball itself. Then I know where my pupil will come, and then I simply curve over the lines for the upper and lower eyelid over that roundness of that eyeball itself. Then I try to figure out where the iris will be, and depending on how open the eyes are, that will decide how much white of the eye there will be, of course. But this is just a mere study, and just to get that in your fingers, that great feel of 3D. Now, choosing charcoal is one of my favorite when I'm studying, but of course you can also make this drawing with graphite pencils if you want. And you can also draw this one on white paper, that's no problem at all. But because I'm also trying to figure out to get as realistic as possible, I am choosing the mid-gray toned paper, and then I'm choosing my black and white charcoal, and just see how far it will stretch me. Drawing with white on gray is very, very beautiful indeed. And what I also use is the blender stick, and here and there the pencil eraser if I want to put in corrections. That's no problem at all, of course. And that's the fun part about the charcoal. It can be blended so perfectly with the blender stick. But of course graphite does this too, so don't let this withhold you. If you want to do this study with graphite, just go ahead. Now with the charcoal I can go in really, really dark, of course. And now it's time to also get in some white. The white is very, very white indeed once you apply it on the gray tone paper. Now this is an extra study, and for me it is a perfect way to practice and to gradually move over to color when I'm ready for it. So that's also why I chose the black and white charcoal. Now what you can see is the thickness of the eyelids, the upper and the lower eyelid, and there is a lot of light on the lower eyelid. The lower eyelid goes over the iris itself a little bit. And I also use the white for the high tones on the skin itself. And here you can see the deepness of the skull, where the eyeball is inside the skull. So there comes a lot of shadow, and then I place the white on the flesh above the upper eyelid. Now my model on the left does not have many eyelashes, but I draw them in anyway. And as you can see, there actually is a reflection of those eyelashes on that bright spot of light just above the pupil. Now in the eyelashes there are black but also white reflections, and on the flesh here on the top of the eye there are also little hairs just underneath the eyebrow. So those are all tiny details, and of course here on YouTube this drawing is fast forwarded a little bit, but on my Patreon page I will do this in real time, and I will completely narrate it, because drawing of eyes is so very, very difficult indeed, but it is so important for when you start to draw portraits. If you draw a portrait and the eye is not pleasing to look at, then your portrait drawing will be a fiasco. So that is why I pressure you to draw and study as many eyes as you can. Well, I hope you found this tutorial very helpful, and if you do, please give it a big thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe, of course. I will study more and more eyes. And of course, I hope to see you again next Friday for another Friday's tutorial. If you want to learn even more, then please feel free to visit my Patreon page. Till that time, I will see you again next Friday.